Every morning when you wake up, your brain doesn't know what time it is for a moment. Just a moment. Literally a tenth of a second. Eyes open, but the world isn't there yet. Then you look at your phone, and everything falls into place. But in that instant, that brief void, you are exactly like your ancestors from 300,000 years ago. Because that void is your brain's true state. No clock, no alarm, no screen. Just darkness and something ticking inside you. What if that something didn't exist? Not just the alarm, not the phone, no clock, no sun through the window, just you and an endless dark. When would you get up? Most people answer that with, I wouldn't know. But that's wrong, because your body knows the answer to that question. Every morning, without you doing anything, a tiny structure deep inside your brain wakes up and starts the countdown to begin the day. You didn't invent this. Nobody invented this. It was working 300,000 years ago in exactly the same way, without ever breaking down. But here's the strange part. Modern science only discovered this mechanism a few decades ago, and when it did, what it found wasn't just biology. It was one of the greatest losses in human history. First, imagine where you are. East Africa, 50,000 years ago. The air is cold. The ground is hard. There is no light anywhere, just fire. A small flickering fire that could go out at any moment. And you are sleeping beside that fire. But this isn't the sleep, you know. This is a survival strategy. Because in that darkness, 30 meters away, there are leopards, hyenas, wolves, and their eyes work far better than yours. You can't see them, but they can see you. That's why sleep in that world was a quiet risk. Closing your eyes every night was like dying a little, and opening them every morning was a small victory. So how did that victory come? How did that person wake up? No alarm, no clock, no morning news, just darkness, and something working inside them without their knowing. The answer is hidden right in the middle of your brain. Inside the hypothalamus, there is a structure smaller than a grain of rice. It's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and this structure is the oldest clock in the world. It works even without seeing light. It ticks even without sound, and every day, in approximately 24 hours, it completes one full rotation. In 1999, Harvard University tested this clock. They isolated volunteers completely from artificial light. No clocks, no daylight, no information from the outside. And yet, every participant's circadian cycle held, an average of 24 hours and 11 minutes, nearly perfectly locked to the solar day. But this clock doesn't just keep time. It does something else. Hours before morning arrives, while it is still completely dark outside, your brain begins releasing cortisol. This hormone is usually known as the stress hormone, but that label is incomplete. Cortisol is your body's morning briefing. It adjusts blood sugar. It wakes the metabolism. It primes the immune system. Outside, it's still night, but the body is already transitioning to day. And this worked in exactly the same way 300,000 years ago. But now, let's get to the real shock, because the biological clock is only the beginning of this story. UCLA sleep researcher Jerome Siegel shook sleep science with a study published in 2015. Siegel and his team worked with 3 communities still living without electricity today: the Hadza of Tanzania, the Jew, Hoanzi of the Kalahari, and the Tsimane of Bolivia. These people live far from modern light pollution, carrying on a life unchanged for thousands of years. The researchers fitted them with wristwatch-sized sensors. For 393 days, they recorded every movement, every moment of sleep, and what they found demolished many of the assumptions in sleep science. These people didn't go to sleep when the sun went down. On average, they fell asleep about 3 hours after sunset. During that window, they cooked, prepared arrows, talked, and they woke before sunrise. So what woke them up? Not light, not sound, temperature. Throughout the night, the air cools, but just before dawn, the temperature reaches its lowest point and begins to rise very slowly. That shift in warmth tells the clock inside the body it's time, and the body responds before the sky has even brightened. Siegel put it this way: in natural conditions, humans sleep during a period of declining temperature. In modern life, we spend the entire night in heated rooms at a constant temperature. This erases the most fundamental trigger in our evolutionary program, and we never connect that to why mornings feel so hard. But there was something else in this study, something even more striking. In these communities, chronic insomnia was almost non-existent, between 1.5% and 2.5%. In modern Western societies, that number exceeds 20%. The difference isn't technology. The difference is the relationship with heat, light, and darkness. But Siegel's study had one more finding. The researchers nearly glossed over it in the publication. It seemed so ordinary, so expected, that nobody stopped to think about it. But when you do stop, it changes everything. None of these people slept through the night without waking. Everyone, every night, woke up once or several times. And nobody saw this as a disorder, because it wasn't a disorder. It was normal. It had always been normal. We just forgot. Historian Roger Eckerich proved this in 2001. He spent 16 years in archives. He combed through more than 500 historical documents, prayer books from the 1400s, court records, medical texts, ordinary people's diaries, even passages from Homer's Odyssey, and all of them describe the same same thing. First sleep, second sleep. Before the industrial age, people went to bed shortly after sunset, slept for about 4 hours, then stayed awake for 1 to 2 hours. Then they fell back asleep until morning. This waking period was called the watch. It wasn't a duty. It was humanity's most peaceful hour. During this time, people interpreted their dreams, talked with neighbors, thought, prayed, and wrote. A doctor's manual from the 1500s advised patients, the best time for study and reflection is this quiet interval between first and second sleep. Now think about this. Historians read these texts for centuries, but they kept translating first sleep as something else, because it never occurred to them that people might have ever slept differently than they do now. The assumption had sunk so deep that they mistranslated ancient Greek and medieval Latin to make it fit their modern experience. They couldn't see the truth, because they didn't want to see it. Then science stepped in. Washington, the National Institute of Mental Health. Psychiatrist Thomas Ware ran an experiment. He removed all artificial light from the lives of volunteers. 14 hours of darkness every night, just like our ancestors. No one was told what to do. There was no guidance. Within a few weeks, every participant settled into the same pattern. 4 hours of sleep, 1 to 3 hours of quiet wakefulness, then 4 more hours of sleep. Nobody planned it. Nobody suggested it. Their bodies remembered. But that wasn't the most surprising part. Ware measured the participants' hormone levels during that waking period, and he found something remarkable. The brain was producing prolactin, the same hormone that appears during meditation in deep stillness. When participants described how they felt, they used the same words every time. Calm, reflective, almost meditative. This was a third state of consciousness between sleep and full waking. Neither one nor the other. Something else entirely. And the vast majority of modern humans have never experienced it. Think about that. There is a state of mind your ancestors reached every single night. Every human alive for thousands of years experienced this, and we erased it. Then we named it insomnia and tried to treat it. But it wasn't a disorder. It was the program itself. Now take one step further back. It's the middle of the night. Your eyes open. You're lying there. You can't sleep, and you're almost certainly thinking something is wrong. But maybe nothing is wrong. Maybe your body is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Trying to run a rhythm thousands of years old. Trying to open a watch hour. Trying to give you that quiet interval to think, to rest, to simply exist. And you pick up your phone and scroll through social media. And that program gets interrupted again. So what about morning? What happened when the sun rose? Picture this. The New Mexico desert. An anthropologist is sitting with an elder of the Pueblo tribe. The old man says to him, "We wake before the sun rises, because to witness the sun's ascent is to become part of its power." It sounds like ritual, but he's describing biology. When the ancient human opened their eyes, the sky was still deep blue right before the sun. And in that moment, before knowing anything about the world outside, the body was already ready, because something was happening. The moment sunlight touched the retina, the brain stopped producing melatonin. Cortisol completed its peak, body temperature climbed, and the entire system received one signal. The day has begun. This mechanism exists in you today. It still works. It never broke. The problem is, you disrupt it. When you turn on the bathroom light in the middle of the night, you're telling your brain the sun has risen. When you stare at your phone for an hour before bed, blue light delays melatonin production for hours. When you look directly at a bright screen first thing in the morning, the system loses synchronization. And then you're grateful for your alarm clock. But you could have woken up without it. You could have woken up feeling better. Before you created a problem your ancestors never knew, your brain was already ready every morning before sunrise. Cortisol had begun its work hours earlier. The temperature signal had arrived. The body was prepared. The alarm is simply the thing that launches you before the body is ready. And that has a name. Sleep inertia. That heavy, groggy, irritable feeling in the mornings. What happens when the brain is cut off before it completes full activation? Your ancestor didn't feel this, because chronic insomnia barely existed among them. Remember that number from the Hadza study? 1.5%. We're at 20% today. The difference isn't technology. The difference is forgetting the dark. But now let's go down to the oldest layer of this story, because ancient humans didn't rely on biology alone. They observed, they tracked, and they built. Göbekli Tepe, southeastern Anatolia, built 12,000 years ago, 6,000 years older than Stonehenge. History books usually describe it as a temple, but think for a moment. No writing yet, no metal, no wheel. And these people carried stones weighing 10 to 20 tons across kilometers and aligned them so the sun would rise from a precise angle on a precise day. That much effort wasn't only for faith, it was to survive. Knowing which day the sun would turn meant knowing when seeds would go into the ground, when the migration would begin, when the hunt would be most plentiful. A wrong calculation and you starve in the middle of winter. The right one, and the tribe lives another year. They hadn't invented a clock because the sky was already there, and their bodies were locked to that sky. When the morning birds began to sing, the sun was near. When certain stars appeared, the season had changed. When the temperature began to drop, it was time to sleep, and the body conducted all of this like an orchestra. extra, without ever charging, without ever changing a battery, for hundreds of thousands of years. And the stones of Göbekli Tepe still stand there today. Every day, at the same hour, the sun falls across them at the same angle. Nobody told them to do that. The stones remember. And now, here you are. The same body, the same small piece of the same brain, the same cortisol cycle, the same temperature sensors, the same two-part sleep program. Nothing inside you has changed. But outside is completely different. Night is no longer dark. Temperature is kept constant. Blue light deceives your brain. The alarm fires right in the middle of your sleep cycle. And when you wake at 2 in the morning, you think you're sick. You look for a remedy. You look for a sleeping pill. But you never once asked this. What if my body is right? For 300,000 years, every human lived within this cycle. Hunted, fought, built civilizations, carried the stones of Göbekli Tepe. And every morning, without an alarm, without a clock, without a screen, they woke up. Everything they had, you still have, right now. Intact, undeleted. But every night, you bury it a little deeper. With screens, with light, you hand the controls to an alarm instead of trusting your own body. And maybe the real question isn't this. The real question is, if the human body has carried a perfectly functioning system for thousands of years, why don't we trust it? And the answer to that question is going to unsettle you far more than you expect. Because sleep isn't just a matter of biology. Sleep is a matter of control. And whoever decides when you sleep, how you sleep, when you wake, is actually deciding something much larger. But that's a different story.